Good morning. Up here at Chandler Park, catching the sunrise, coming over downtown and the river. Thank you for being with me. I'm going to continue with this chapter 4 from How to Raise Your Self-Esteem by Nathaniel Brandon. We are on page 58. Powerful tool for cultivating self-awareness, self-acceptance, and personal growth is the sentence completion procedure, which I wrote about in 2 earlier books. If you could hear what I cannot say, and to see what I see and know what I know. One version of the procedure can serve us here. All that is required is a pen and a notebook. At the top of a fresh page, write one of the incomplete sentences or sentence stems I provide below. Follow the order of the stems as given. After you have written a stem at the top of a page, write 6 to 10 endings as rapidly as you can. Do not worry if your ending is literally true or if one ending conflicts with another. None of your endings is written in stone. It is merely an exercise, an experiment. There we go. Okay. You may wish to tell yourself you can't do this. I assure you that you can. I have taught this procedure to many thousands of people, and some of them always start out saying, I can't, and then proceed to do it. At the top of the first page, write the stem. Sometimes, looking back over my life, I can hardly believe that at one time I ... Now, write 6 to 10 completions for that sentence. Go. Sometimes, looking back over my life, I can hardly believe that at one time I ... And then, on the next page, write, it's not easy for me to admit that ... And then do the endings. Then on the next page, write, it's not easy for me to be self-accepting when I ... And do the endings. Then, there is about 10 more, so I'm going to read them for us. One of my emotions I have trouble accepting is ... One of my actions I have trouble accepting is ... One of the thoughts I tend to push out of my mind is... One of the things about my body I have trouble accepting is... If I were more accepting of my body... If I were more accepting of things I have done... If I were more accepting of my feelings... The scary thing about being self-accepting is... And the next one, if other people saw me being more self-accepting... The good thing about being self-accepting might be... Finish the sentence. I am becoming aware. I am beginning to feel. As I learn to stop denying my experience. And the final one, as I breathe deeply and allow myself to experience self-acceptance. These are all of the stems. Oh, let's see if I can. No, not going to happen today. It's too dark. Okay, remember you can just rewind this or replay it. I must caution you, if you merely read these words and do not actually do the exercise as described, you will deprive yourself of discoveries I cannot otherwise make available to you. I trust by now it has become clear why self-acceptance is essential to positive change. If I refuse to accept the fact that often I live unconsciously, how will I learn to live more consciously? If I refuse to accept the fact that often I live irresponsibly, how will I learn to live more responsibly? If I refuse to accept the fact that often I live passively, how will I learn to live more actively? I cannot overcome a fear whose reality I deny. I cannot correct a sexual problem I will not admit exists. I cannot heal a pain I refuse to recognize as mine. I cannot change traits I insist I do not have. I cannot forgive myself for an action I will not acknowledge having taken. To accept ourselves is to accept the fact that what we think, feel, and do are all expressions of the self at the time they occur. This does not mean that they are the final words on who we are, unless we encase them in cement through our denials and disownings. Allow me to share another personal example to further illuminate this issue. There's a train. I love the sounds of the morning. And even though it's a Monday, it feels like a Sunday. There's nobody anywhere. All right, here's this story. Some years ago, my wife, Patricia, whom I very much loved, died. For a long time, my mind would endlessly review different aspects of our relationship. I would recall incidents when I had been thoughtless or unkind, and sometimes would push such memories away because they were unbearably painful. I did not deny the memories outright, but neither did I fully accept them and allow them and their implications to be assimilated and integrated. A part of myself was left fragmented, alienated from the rest of me. Later, I remarried, and while I am deeply and happily in love with my present wife, Devers, I saw certain patterns of thoughtlessness and lack of consideration repeating themselves. I began to reflect on a fact that I taught to other people, that if I could not fully accept the fact of some of my past behavior, it was almost inevitable that in one form or another I would repeat it. So I began to spend more time making real to myself certain actions I had taken in my earlier marriage, such as failing to respond on some occasions when Patricia needed my understanding and my help, or being overly impatient, or being excessively absorbed in work. The perfectly ordinary unkindnesses that love does not automatically prevent us from perpetuating. Making myself relive specific instances, reviewing detail by detail, was very painful. Making myself look clearly at my actions was at times agitating beyond words. Since Patricia had gone, and there was no way to make it up, but I knew that if I persisted, and of course if I achieved the same clarity regarding my behavior in my present marriage with Devers, two things would happen. Beautiful. I would feel more integrated, and I would be less likely to repeat actions I would regret. I invite you to consider some actions of yours that you regret. See if you can drop self-blame while retaining the experience of yourself as the author of the action. Discover what it is like to accept that at some time in your life you chose to take the action What does this form of honesty feel like? What are you learning about self-esteem? After we accept the fact that our actions are our actions, there is still the issue of assessment, and we will have more to say in the next chapter about the process of assessing regretted behavior, thinking about it and interpreting its meaning in a way that nurtures rather than undermines self-esteem. But this much I will say now: the errors we are willing to confront become the rungs of a ladder leading to higher self-esteem. My son's almost here. Anything that we have the possibility of experiencing, we have the possibility of disowning, either immediately or later in memory. Anything that does not fit our official self-concept or our official belief system, or that evokes anxiety for any reason whatever, we can reject. I can refuse to accept my sensuality. I can refuse to accept my spirituality. I can disown my sorrow. I can disown my joy. I can repress the memory of actions I am ashamed of. I can repress the memory of actions I am proud of. I can deny my ignorance. I can deny my intelligence. I can refuse to accept my limitations. I can refuse to accept my potentials. I can conceal my weaknesses. I can conceal my strengths. I can deny my feelings of self-hatred. I can deny my feelings of self-love. I can pretend that I am more than I am, and I can pretend that I am less than I am. I can disown my body. I can disown my mind. The problem of non-self-acceptance is by no means confined to negatives. We can be as frightened of our assets as of our shortcomings, as frightened of our genius, ambition, excitement, or beauty as of our emptiness, passivity, depression, or unattractiveness. Our liabilities pose the problem of inadequacy. Our assets, challenge of responsibility. Our strengths, or virtues, can make us feel alone, alienated, cut off from the common herd, a target for envy and hostility. And our desire to belong can overcome any desire to actualize our highest potential. That many women, for example, associate high intelligence or achievement with loss of love or femininity is well known. It may take great courage to be willing to admit, even in the privacy of our own minds, I can do things others don't seem to be able to do, or I am more intelligent than anyone else in my family, or I am unusually good looking, or I want more out of life than the people around me, or I see farther and more clearly. Yeah. Oh, there comes the sun. Looks so big and beautiful. Okay. I recall a young woman who came to me for treatment many years ago. Lorraine was 24 years old, had the face of an angel, and swore like a longshoreman. She had experimented with every drug I had ever heard of and several I hadn't. When she was 18, she had slept in the basement of a college fraternity house where she obtained food and shelter in exchange for sexual services. Now she was supporting herself as a waitress. Something made her pick up my book, The Psychology of Self-Esteem, and it spoke to her. She called my office for an appointment. She did everything she could to make me dislike her, but I liked her. I was convinced that she was hiding an extraordinary person behind a cloak of degradation. I remember one day when, with hypnosis, I age regressed her to a day in junior high school. She began to weep. The teacher was asking questions at random of various pupils. I heard her whisper, "Please, God, if she asks me a question, please don't let me know the answer." I asked why. She answered, "Because they hate you. They hate you if you know too much. They hate you if you're too smart." But she was not only unusually intelligent. As a young girl, she had been tall for her age, physically strong, and unusually well coordinated. She could play almost any sport better than most boys, much to the anger and humiliation of her older brothers, who hit, ridiculed, and tormented her. Without looking at a book, she was an A student. In the small town in which she lived, there was no one like her, no one to talk to. She felt hated by her family and hated for her virtues, not for her shortcomings. As a teenager, she set out on a systematic course of self-destruction as revenge against her family and simultaneously as a cry for help. One day in therapy, when we had been working together for about 6 months, she became very angry with me. When she could not articulate her reasons, I invited her to do sentence completion. "The bad thing about you, Nathaniel, is," and she says, "you believe in me. You refuse to see me as rotten. You make me feel my pain. You make me feel there's hope." By now, she was half crying, half snarling. She went on, "You make me believe in myself. You brought me back to life. You won't see me the way other people see me. I hate you." Now she was sobbing uncontrollably. "It is so hard," she cried over and over again. "What is?" She looked at me with the fearful, hopeful eyes of a wild animal, admitting that what you see is there, that you are right, that I am intelligent, that I am special, that I am good. Even now, almost 2 decades later, that moment remains with me as one of the great rewards of being a therapist. The moment of seeing a human being summon the courage to admit and accept their own glory. 18 months after entering therapy, she was studying creative writing at UCLA. A few years later, she was earning her living as a journalist and was married. When I met her on the street by chance one day, about a decade after she had left therapy, I might not have recognized her if she had not come over and greeted me with a laughing hello. She was well-dressed, self-assured, irresistibly cheerful, and seemingly untouched by tragedy. "I don't know if you remember me, but I remember you." I hesitated for a moment. "Is it Lorraine?" "Sure, that's me. How great to see you. Do you know who you are?" "Oh wait, do you know who you are, Nathaniel?" "Who am I?" "You're the man who refused to see me as a mongrel and a slut. You saw me as someone special, and you made me see it. God, there were times when I hated you so much, accepting who I was, who I really was. That was the hardest thing I ever had to do in my whole life. People always talk about how hard it is to accept your faults. Somebody ought to talk about how hard it can be to accept your virtues. Sometimes the path to higher self-esteem is lonely and frightening. We cannot fully know in advance how much more satisfying our lives will be. But the more we are willing to experience and accept the many different aspects of who we are, the richer our inner worlds, the greater our resources, the more appropriate we will feel to the challenges and opportunities of life. Also, it is more likely that we will find or create a style of existence that will meet our individual needs. Thus far, we have dealt with self-acceptance as an application of rationality and realism, respect for our own experience, the refusal to be at war with ourselves. But there is another, deeper meaning to self-acceptance we need to consider. I'm referring to the courage required to admit that there is a place within us where, faults or no faults, we like ourselves. Many people find this a difficult idea to grasp. Self-acceptance, in the ultimate sense, refers to an attitude of self-value and self-commitment that derives fundamentally from the fact that I am alive and conscious, that I exist. It is an experience deeper than self-esteem. It is a pre-rational, pre-moral act of self-affirmation, a kind of primitive egoism that is the birthright of every conscious organism. And yet the human beings have the power to act against or nullify. Perhaps the following will help to make this issue clear. Sometimes after a client in therapy has expounded at length on his or her lack of self-esteem, I want to evoke that other perspective, to which he or she seems to be oblivious. I will switch the sentence completion and ask the client to work with this stem. If I were willing to admit how much I secretly like myself, ... And then after a few protests from the client, I typically hear endings such as the following. If I were willing to admit how much I secretly like myself, suppose other people don't agree, I would be embarrassed. I'd have to feel a lot of denied pain. You would be surprised. A lot of people would be shocked. I would be scared. My family would not like it. I'd have no excuse for passivity. I could get on with my life. Then I might suggest this stem. The good things about pretending to dislike myself is to beat other people to the punch, to have an excuse. No one expects things of me. People feel sorry for me. I don't have to do anything. It's easier. It's what my parents expect of me. And the next, if I had the courage to admit that, whatever my shortcomings, I like myself, ... I'd be free. I'd be telling the truth. I'd have to separate from my family. I would respect myself. It'd be like stepping into another world. Everything would change. The world would open up to me. I suggest that you take your time and read these endings again. Please do not rush past them. They reveal a good deal of valuable insight that may have relevance to you. I suggest you take your time and read these endings. Oh my Lord, that's the same one. An attitude of self-acceptance is precisely what an effective therapist strives to awaken in a person of even the lowest self-esteem. This attitude can inspire a person to face whatever he or she most dreads, to encounter within, without collapsing into self-hatred, repudiating his or her value as a person, or surrendering the will to live. Thus, a person might be unhappy about experiencing poor self-esteem, yet accept it along with the self-doubts and feelings of guilt. I accept them as part of how I experience myself right now. Sometimes people confuse the whole subject of self-esteem by declaring that everyone should have good self-esteem regardless of anything he or she does or fails to do. This is utterly impossible. They are confusing self-esteem, which necessarily depends on certain conditions, with self-acceptance, which can be unconditional. All right, I have 2 pages left. I know this one's getting kind of long, and that sun is really bright in my face. Let me see if I can wrap up chapter 4 with us here. Please stay with me. Here's a simple sentence completion exercise that will allow you to begin to explore the issue of self-acceptance in your own life. Take a notebook. At the top of the page, write the following stem. Sometimes I dislike myself when I, and then complete the sentence. And then do 6 to 10 endings as rapidly as you can. Once again, do not worry if your completions are all literally true. Do not censor yourself, or you will learn nothing. And then we've got a whole bunch more here. Whew. Okay. One of the things I dislike about myself is. One of the things I like about myself is. I like myself least when I like myself most when Mother gave me a view of myself as. Father gave me a view of myself as. When I feel disliked. When I am proud of something no one else cares about or understands. ... If I were to admit how much I secretly like myself. The good things about pretending to dislike myself is. The scary thing about admitting that, faults or no faults, I like myself is. I am becoming aware. If any of what I'm writing is true, ... If I were willing to breathe deeply and allow myself to experience the joy of being. Those were all the stems for you to complete. There is a good chance that if you participate in this exercise fully and conscientiously, you will make contact with that part of yourself that is deeper than doubts, fears, and guilts. I hope so. However, the discovery is not always greeted with delight. Sometimes it is frightening. Sometimes you want to pull back from it, refuse to accept it, because of some intuitive knowledge that to accept it fully is almost irresistibly to confront the responsibility of living consciously. All right, I missed that. Let me try that again. However, the discovery is not always greeted with delight. Sometimes it is frightening. Sometimes you want to pull back from it, refuse to accept it, because of some intuitive knowledge that to accept it fully is almost irresistibly to confront the responsibility of living consciously. More than one client in therapy has protested, if I accept the fact that I like myself, I'll have to behave differently. Or, if I accept the fact that I like myself, I'll have to stay too conscious. But when you fail to live consciously, and this is one of the most important facts about human psychology, the deepest and most primitive level of your being tends, in effect, to turn against you by generating pain at the level of self-esteem. It is the deepest I we offend when we default on the integrity that positive self-esteem requires. If I do not have the loyalty to stand by a friend, that friend feels betrayed by me. By this token, if I do not have the loyalty to stand by myself, which means the courage to know that I like myself and to embrace the responsibility of doing so, then I too feel betrayed, even though I may be unable to explain my feelings or to articulate my experience. If you review the material in this chapter and the exercises you did, you will most certainly be struck by the fact that you are more self-accepting in some areas than in others. You may accept certain of your physical attributes, thoughts, feelings, or actions, while denying or disowning others. Make a list of 6 facts about yourself you have difficulty accepting completely. This may require a challenging level of honesty from you. Remember that accepting does not mean liking. Then in your notebook write, the hardest thing about accepting. Fill in the item is, and write 6 to 10 endings. Then do the same for the stem. If I were to accept, fill in the item completely, ... Then do, if it turns out that the truth is the truth, whether I accept it or not, ... Then do, I am becoming aware. Perhaps it is now clearer to you that self-acceptance is truly a heroic act. What would it mean, practically, if over the next 7 days you were to commit to experimenting each day with new instances of self-acceptance? All right, my love. That is the end. We made it all the way to page 69. Chapter 5 is next. Liberation from Guilt. Starts on page 71. Thank you for being with me and getting to see the sun up nice and close. I appreciate you.